The illusion of fairness. Why good people rarely win. You were taught to be good, to be kind, to tell the truth, to play fair, because fairness always wins in the end. Didn't they say that? But what happens when you look around, and the kind are tired, the honest are poor, and the ruthless keep rising? What happens when the people who cheat, lie, manipulate, are rewarded with applause, promotions, and power? You tell yourself there must be a reason. Karma, maybe. Timing. God's bigger plan. Anything to keep the story of fairness alive. Because without that story, the world gets hard to look at. But maybe the world was never fair to begin with. Maybe the idea of fairness wasn't a law of the universe, just a comfort we inherited. Maybe, just maybe, being good was never enough. We like to believe in justice, that if we're good, good things will come to us, that life is a meritocracy, that there's a balance, cosmic or social, keeping things in order. But Friedrich Nietzsche disagreed. He said morality, as we know it, wasn't born from truth. It was born from weakness. In his view, there were two types of morality. Master morality, built by those in power, valuing strength, courage, independence, and slave morality, created by those without power, valuing humility, obedience, and kindness. But why? Because when you have no sword, you praise peace. When you're caged, you glorify stillness. When you're oppressed, you call submission virtue. The idea of being good became a survival mechanism, not because it was true, but because it was safe. Fairness was the story the powerless told themselves to stay sane in a world they couldn't control. And over time, we forgot it was just a story. We started to believe it was the natural order, that goodness would be rewarded and cruelty punished. But look around. Is that what you see? Do you see the kind being raised to power? Or do you see them being used as tools, as martyrs, as expendables? This isn't about losing faith. It's about seeing clearly. Because once you realize that the system was never built for fairness, you stop waiting for it to deliver justice, and you start asking better questions. But the story doesn't stop at philosophy. It's etched into how we raise children, how we build systems, how we punish and reward. We tell children, be nice, don't argue, share even if it hurts. We praise politeness over honesty, obedience over courage, pleasantness over truth. And then we wonder why those who challenge the system, those who speak up, get labeled as difficult, while those who stay silent are called good. But goodness without boundaries is not a virtue. It's self-erasure. Society rewards compliance, not always character. It praises those who follow the rules, even when the rules are broken. It elevates the agreeable, not the just. Because justice is messy. It threatens comfort. It disturbs the calm waters where manipulation hides. We don't want truth. We want peace, even if it's fake. And so we glorify the gentle, but only when their gentleness doesn't disrupt power. The good person is useful to the system. They work hard. They don't complain. They believe they will be seen. Eventually, if they're patient enough. But often they're not. They're overlooked, underpaid, used. Because in a world where power protects itself, kindness is not a currency. It's a camouflage. And that's the tragedy. Not that good people fail, but that they keep blaming themselves when they do. They think, maybe I wasn't kind enough. Maybe I didn't give enough. Maybe if I were more forgiving. But what if the real problem was never you? What if the system was never built to reward you? If even a small part of you resonates with these words, if you've ever felt unseen, unheard, or like you were performing instead of living, This space was made for you. Here, we don't just scroll past truth. We stop for it. We sit with it. We let it change us. If this spoke to you, consider subscribing. Not for more content. There's a certain look in the eyes of good people. A quiet sadness. The kind that doesn't scream, doesn't rage. It just lingers. It says, I did everything right. Why wasn't that enough? They were generous, thoughtful, patient. They stayed, listened, gave, and still, they were betrayed, ignored, pushed aside for someone louder, sharper, colder. But the world doesn't reward goodness. It rewards strategy, presence, strength, or at the very least, noise, and sometimes, cruelty. The painful truth is this: being good often becomes a role we play, not a truth we live. A script we follow because we were told it's the way to be loved, to be safe, to be accepted. But in playing this role, many forget how to be real. They say yes when they mean no. They shrink when they should stand. They forgive without healing. They stay quiet to avoid conflict, even when silence is betrayal. Because society loves pleasant people. It romanticizes the gentle, but only when they're convenient. Step outside that role, get angry, get loud, demand respect, and suddenly you're no longer good. You're too much. Selfish. Hard to deal with. So many of us wear the mask of goodness not because we're truly at peace, but because we're terrified of rejection. We think if we make ourselves small enough, soft enough, selfless enough, someone will finally notice, finally value us, finally love us for it. But that day never comes, because a mask cannot be loved. Only the face beneath it can, and the world rarely asks to see that face. Somewhere along the way, you learned that being good was safer than being real. Maybe it was in childhood, when your anger was met with shame, when your sadness was ignored, when your boundaries were seen as rebellion, not self-respect. So you adjusted, smiled more, needed less, and called it maturity. You became the one who fixes everything, who says it's okay even when it's not, who gives and gives and gives. But inside, something cracks, and over time, it becomes a silent kind of resentment, not loud enough to destroy, but deep enough to haunt. This is where many good people live, between longing and self-denial, between hope and exhaustion, and still, they wait for recognition, for reciprocity, for the world to say, thank you for being good. But what if that thank you never comes? What if being good was never about truth, but about control? Because here's the twist. Playing the good person can be a way to feel superior, to avoid the messiness of anger, confrontation, and selfish need. It lets you say, at least I'm not like them. It keeps you morally safe, but emotionally detached. And that detachment becomes a cage. You don't express. You don't demand. You don't break rules, even when the rules are unjust. You call it virtue, but it's really fear. Fear of what might happen if you stop pleasing. Fear of becoming the villain. Fear of finally seeing yourself without the mask. The truth is, you're not just tired from giving. You're tired of pretending that giving was enough. Because deep down, you know, being good doesn't guarantee you'll be seen. It just guarantees you'll be useful. And being useful is not the same as being valued. Maybe the world was never broken. Maybe it was just honest, brutally honest, unapologetically raw. It never promised justice, never guaranteed that kindness would win, that truth would rise, that love would heal. That was your promise, your belief, your story. And it's okay. It made you gentle. It made you human. But now, It's time to wake up. Because here's the truth most people will never tell you. Being good does not make you free. It makes you predictable. It makes you safe for others, but dangerous to yourself. The world doesn't need more obedient souls. It needs more authentic ones. Not people who are nice, people who are real. And real people break the rules. They speak when it's uncomfortable. They walk away when it costs them everything. They say no, even when it makes them unloved. They choose truth, not image. So if you've been waiting for fairness to reward you, stop. It won't. But that's not the end of the story, because the real reward is what happens when you no longer need it. When you stop playing good and start living true. When your actions aren't about being seen, but about being whole. When your worth is not measured by how much you tolerate, but by how deeply you know who you are. You were never meant to be liked by everyone. You were meant to be you, fully, deeply, unapologetically. Let the mask go. Let the illusion die. Let the good person you've been performing finally rest. Not because it failed you, but because you've outgrown it. And maybe that's not defeat. Maybe that's freedom.